Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking into something you flagged for us, which is really fascinating: the evolution of presidential power in the U.S.
Right. You sent over some great material on this.
Yeah, exactly. So our mission today is basically to unpack how that power has shifted over time,
Yeah.
from the Constitution to now, and what the key drivers behind those changes really are.
Yeah, sounds good. It's important to remember the Constitution, specifically Article 2. It laid out the framework, but it was just the beginning, really.
It's a starting point.
Yeah. How the presidency actually works today, that's a result of history, events, how individuals acted in the office.
Yeah.
It's a mix of things built on that original structure.
Okay, so the core question is, how did we get from A to B, from the constitutional idea to the modern presidency, and what factors really push that change?
Let's start with that foundation, then Article 2.
Okay.
The thing is, even the founders, they had different ideas about executive power. Some wanted a stronger figure, others were more cautious.
Right, which is why we ended up with separation of powers and checks and balances, isn't it? That inherent tension.
Precisely. That push and pull is sort of baked into the system. The Constitution tries to balance giving the president enough power to act, but also making sure that power is limited.
So what specific powers are actually listed there? I mean, the big ones.
Well, you've got the president as commander-in-chief of the military,
Okay.
the power to appoint ambassadors, judges, other officials.
Yeah.
But with the Senate's advice and consent, that's key.
The Senate check.
Yep. And of course, the power to veto legislation from Congress.
And there are duties too, right? Like the State of the Union.
Exactly. The duty to inform Congress about the state of the nation and recommend measures.
Uh-huh.
But the actual scope, how it works in practice, that started taking shape very early on.
Which brings us to George Washington. His presidency seems absolutely critical for setting precedents.
Oh, definitely. This is where a lot of the, let's call them unwritten rules started. Washington's actions really fleshed out the role beyond just the text.
Like what specifically?
Well, forming a cabinet of advisors, for example. That's not explicitly required in the Constitution in that way, but he did it, and it stuck. It became fundamental.
Oh.
And also, his initiative in foreign affairs. He took the lead, setting a pattern for the president being the main actor on the world stage.
So even from the start, the role was being shaped by the person in the office.
Absolutely. Then another major layer gets added: political parties.
Ah, yes, the rise of parties. How did that change things?
Well, it totally altered the landscape. Presidents weren't just individuals anymore. They were leaders of national movements, needing to campaign across states to win the Electoral College.
And that national election aspect is important.
Hugely important. The president became the only official elected by the entire country. That gives them a unique kind of political standing, a national mandate that members of Congress don't really have in the same way.
So it amplified their influence.
Definitely. And as party leader, the president could heavily influence the agenda in Congress, pushing their party's priorities.
Okay, so we have the constitutional base, early precedents, political parties. What about big events? Crises seem to play a huge role.
Oh, absolutely. That's a recurring theme throughout American history. Moments of major crisis, think the Civil War, the Great Depression, the World Wars, they almost invariably lead to an expansion of presidential power.
Why is that, do you think?
Well, in a crisis, there's often this, public demand for quick, decisive action. And the executive branch is usually seen as the part of government best equipped to provide that kind of leadership. Congress can be slower, more deliberative.
So people look to the president.
Exactly. And presidents often step into that void. Lincoln, during the Civil War, for instance, took actions that were constitutionally debated at the time.
And FDR is maybe the prime example.
Right. Franklin D. Roosevelt, during the Great Depression and then World War II. The scale of those crises led to a really dramatic expansion of federal government activity overall, and presidential authority along with it.
It kind of reset the baseline, didn't it?
It really did. And what's interesting is that sometimes these powers, expanded during an emergency, they don't always fully recede afterwards. The government structure grows.
Which leads nicely into the growth of the executive branch itself. It got bigger, right? More complex.
Massively so. As the government's responsibilities grew, especially after the New Deal and World War II, the president needed a much larger administrative apparatus just to manage everything.
That's where things like the White House office come in.
Precisely. The White House office, or WHO, and the Office of Management and Budget, the OMB. These are crucial parts of the modern presidency.
What do they actually do?
Well, think of the WHO as the president's immediate staff advisors, aides, communications team. They're the inner circle, handling day-to-day operations, policy advice, managing the president's message. Their closeness to the president gives them a lot of influence.
And the OMB.
The OMB is hugely powerful. It prepares the federal budget proposal, oversees agency spending, and reviews proposed regulations from all the executive departments. It gives the president enormous leverage over the entire government's operations and policy implementation.
So it's like the nerve center for managing the vast federal bureaucracy.
In many ways, yes. They coordinate policy, make sure agencies are aligned with the president's goals, and manage the flow of information.
Okay. Now, it's something else that feels very modern, is this idea of presidents going public.
Ah, yes. That's become a really central strategy. It's about presidents appealing directly to the American people to build support for their agendas.
Trying to use public opinion as leverage against Congress.
Exactly. If a president can rally the public behind a policy, it puts pressure on members of Congress, even those from the opposing party, to go along.
And media technology must have fueled this, right?
Oh, enormously.
Right.
Radio first, then especially television, and now the internet and social media. They've given presidents unprecedented tools to bypass traditional media filters and speak directly to citizens.
It's interesting, though, does that direct appeal change the balance? Does it sideline Congress in some ways?
That's a really important question. It can, potentially. By taking the case straight to the people, it can sometimes circumvent the slower, more negotiation-focused process within Congress. It changes the dynamics of policymaking.
Speaking of policy, how central is the president in actually making policy today?
They're absolutely crucial. The president really sets the national agenda. They use the State of the Union, speeches, proposals, their political clout. Basically, they highlight the issues they think are important and propose solutions.
They drive the conversation.
They do. Now, policymaking is usually collaborative, involving Congress, interest groups, executive agencies. It's complex.
But the president initiates a lot of it.
A huge amount.
Yeah.
And, of course, they have the final say on legislation passed by Congress through the veto power. Signing a bill into law or rejecting it is a massive lever of influence.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about how presidential power has grown through precedent, parties, crises, the bureaucracy, going public. But the checks are still there, right?
Absolutely essential to remember that. The system of checks and balances is still fundamental, even if the dynamics have shifted.
So Congress still holds the power of the purse.
Yes, Congress controls funding, which is a major check, and they write the laws. They can investigate the executive branch, hold hearings.
And the courts.
The Supreme Court, through judicial review, can declare presidential actions or laws unconstitutional. That's a profound check on power.
And then there's impeachment, the ultimate check.
Exactly. While it's rare and highly political, the impeachment process remains a constitutional tool to hold a president accountable for serious misconduct.
So pulling it all together, the picture that emerges is one of evolving power. Not unlimited, but definitely transformed.
Right. It's shaped by the Constitution, yes, but also by history, politics, technology, even the personalities of the presidents themselves. It's dynamic. The sources you shared really highlight this interplay, particularly the tension you mentioned earlier.
What tension was that again?
The tension between the need for decisive executive action, especially in foreign policy or crises, and the constitutional role of Congress as the deliberative lawmaking body. Debates over executive orders, war powers.
Yeah.
That's where you really see this friction.
Okay, so for you, our listener, hopefully this deep dive gave you a clearer sense of how the American presidency has become what it is today. It's not static. It's constantly been shaped and reshaped by all these forces within that original constitutional framework.
Exactly. It's been a dynamic process.
And thinking about that dynamic nature, it leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it?
It does. Given how fast technology is still changing, the global challenges we face, how might the power and the very role of the American president continue to evolve? What's next for the office?
What new pressures or opportunities will shape it in the years ahead? Something to mull over.